On this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out, has Sam Montembeault changed the plans for the Montreal Canadiens when it comes to the goaltending position for the future? And for Kent Hughes, can he get off the high-earning salaries by taking on some of the salaries at the NHL trade deadline? And finally, Quebec Premier Francois Legault. He's all in for Colin Bedard. We'll get the panel's thoughts on his comments, plus the bonus questions on this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Welcome into a new episode of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Moe Khan, alongside Stu, Cowan, Rick Green, and Jack Todd, who's stepping in for Andrew Berkshire for this week's episode. Let's dive into it. Samuel Montembeault has played very well. Has this changed the course of action for Kent Hughes in management when it comes to the Canadiens' goaltending position for the future? When you think about this year for Montembeault, 13 games, he's had a goal save percentage of .920 or better. Could he be that guy for them moving forward?
He certainly could at the way it looks at this point. He's 26 years old, which is young for a goalie. Goalies develop a little later usually than players. So I think, the goalie of the future is one of the big question marks for the Canadiens moving forward. Montembeault playing on a team that hasn't been very good, has a winning record. He's 12-11-2. He's got a .908 save percentage. Jake Allen's got an .894 save percentage. So I think moving forward, Jake Allen doesn't figure to be the Canadiens goalie of the future. He's got a new 2-year contract that kicks in next season. But by the time this rebuild, hopefully for the Canadiens' sake, is reaching its peak, maybe in another 2 to 3 years, Jake Allen won't be around. So Sam Montembeault has definitely shown that he might have the potential to be the goalie of the future. And then you got Caden Primo in Laval also. And at some point, Caden Primo has struggled this season in Laval, but last year he was great in Laval, but he's always seemed to struggle in the NHL, almost like a deer in the headlights when he gets called up here. So at some point, I think they need to give him an extended look in the NHL. So I wouldn't be shocked if Kent Hughes trades Jake Allen before the deadline this year. Especially, usually by the trade deadline, there's at least 1 or 2 teams that are desperate for goaltending, either because of an injury or they don't have full confidence in their number one goalie going into the playoffs. Jake Allen has shown he can still be a really good goalie. He can still give his team a chance to win every game. He can steal a game once in a while. So if Kent Hughes gets an offer for Jake Allen, and I imagine he will probably get a few, I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls the trigger on a deal. He doesn't have to be in a rush to do it. But I think, again, like I mentioned, at some point, they need to get Caden Primo up playing fairly regularly in the NHL. And they need to give Sam Montembeault a run of games to see if he can maybe be the number one goalie in the future.
And let's face it, there's a big question mark with Sam Montembeault as far as, if he was given the opportunity, how consistent could he be? And, he faced a lot of adversity early on where, there was a lot of criticism about, look at the goal that he let in. Look at how poorly he played, the following game from a big game. And that's always a tough call on a goaltender. But now that he's been given the opportunity, now that we've seen that, this guy is for real and he's able to do the job. So that puts the team in a little different situation when it comes down to what they have back there with their goaltenders with Jake Allen. And, Stu touched on Caden Primo. There's a guy that's been hiding in Laval and has been given, a little bit of opportunity, but not enough. And they're going to have to get a real good read on Caden Primo by getting him into some games and see whether or not he can make the cut. But Sam Montembeault, good to go. He's doing the job. I'm really happy for him. And, he's responded in such a positive way. And the results speak for themselves when you see that he's given the team an opportunity to win each and every game. So congrats to him. And, hopefully that'll continue because he seems like a really nice young man, 26 years old. And he's got a bright future as we can attest to so far.
He's also big, which I like. He looks bigger to me than Carey Price, although they're at least listed at the same height. And he's superb on the road, or has been. He leads the league in road saves, which is an amazing stat. And after last night, 38 out of 40 against a good Devils team, he's only farther ahead. I like also that you can get this guy and keep him for quite a long while. He's not going to cost you $10 million a year against your cap. He gives you a lot of flexibility. It's a kind of surprise you need to get if you're really going to get better. Because I think I said on this show 3 or 4 months ago that they've got this looming problem with goal. Like you see players coming up, their prospect forwards, their prospect defensemen in particular. But goal looked sort of like a black hole with Primo struggling. But Montembeault has really shored that up. I'm very impressed with him. And he's a likable guy, which never hurts, So
he is a real likable guy when you're dealing with him. A soft-spoken guy. His teammates seem to really like him also. He's got a good sense of humor, too. He can be funny at times. You mentioned, though, Pat, Jack, about him being so tall. I was speaking with an NHL scout recently who was telling me that basically with kids, like when they're scouting, they don't even look at a goalie who's under 6 foot. Basically, like if you have a kid who's a goalie and he's not going to be 6 foot tall, forget about dreaming about him playing in the NHL. Big part about goaltending now is size. The other thing that Montembeault's really good at is handling the puck and moving the puck. And Jake Allen spoke about that recently. He said he's underrated in that part of his game. And, he's not at Carey Price level. I mean, very few goalies, if any, are. But with a team with so many young defensemen and rookie defensemen this season, having a goalie who can move the puck back there is certainly a big help, as Rick would know for sure as a former defenseman. And the other thing with Montembeault, you got to remember, last season he was playing through a real painful wrist injury on his blocker hand, and he was saying every time he made a blocker save, it would hurt. And when the puck was coming, it was almost in the back of his mind, like, how much is this going to hurt? So I think that factored in a lot to how part his struggles last season. He had surgery in the offseason. He's healthy now, and he's played really well. There's been a lot of, I wrote a column this week, and there's been a lot of feel-good stories with the Canadiens this season, even though they've struggled in the standings. And Sam Montembeault is definitely one of them, especially as a local guy.
You like to gauge the character of the player by how they respond to when they don't perform as well as they should perform, and we've seen a number of occasions where he didn't perform that well, and it was like, is he going to bounce back? And that's a test of character, and especially in that position. And he seemed to have matured and been able to find a way to get a better game out there after maybe a tough loss. So those are good ingredients that you like to have at any player, but especially in a goaltender.
Rick, who was the best puck handling goalie you played with?
Mike Palmatier. Yeah, remember him?
There's a blast from the past.
He was amazing. Like, he would even chase pucks down at our blue line. Maybe that's why I liked him so much. I didn't have to go back that far. He was really mobile and didn't care, and he was a guy that was really helpful back there, big time.
Just want to bring up a point with you guys. So you made that point about maybe Jake Allen being dealt before the deadline, and Jack, you brought up the point about the salary that Montembeault has as we speak. Could he create himself a market with Kent Hughes to kind of get a better long-term deal with the Montreal Canadiens if he could be the number one goalie going for the next 2, maybe 3 years?
Oh, yeah. I think he's almost played himself into that already. He's become a really important cog, and I'm sure Kent would rather get him now than after another really good season or something. I think he's probably going to be the guy going forward next season. You look at his stats now, and they're decent. They're more than respectable, but they've also been put up with half the time. He's got 5 rookies in front of him, and a couple of older guys that weren't playing all that well either till Matheson got healthy. He's had an amazing season. He's earned at least a decent leap into the future.
Well, that was one of the good signings by Kent Hughes last summer. Was he signed Montembeault for 2 years at $1 million a year? I mean, what a bargain that is! If you can get a guy playing like a number one goalie for $1 million, is a big change from the $10.5 million for Carey Price. That frees up a lot of money to get some other stuff.
$1 million is almost free today.
Exactly.
Well, I think for Montembeault going to be an important next 12 months or so, he could generate that long-term deal. Speaking of deals, for Kent Hughes, the trade deadline is next week. They'll be in California when it goes down. There's a lot of salaries. For example, Yoel Armia is making $3.4 million with 2 years to go after the season. Mike Hoffman at $4.5 with 1 year to go after this season. You have Gallagher at $6.5 with 4 years to go after this season. And finally, Dvorak at $4.4 with 2 years to go after the season. Gentlemen, does Kent Hughes have to eat some salary to get off these contracts and try and make this team a lot better from the rebuild perspective moving forward?
Well, I think it would be easier for him to eat some salary if he had the players that maybe didn't fit his mix, and could maybe afford to make changes in their personnel. But this is kind of a funny year, and when you look at Edmondson and Monahan as two probable guys, that was a lot of discussion about what was going to happen with them for the future, and then they go down obviously with injury, which are not seem to be short term. It's unfortunate, but I mean, if you look at their personnel, you touched on Armia. What's he going to draw as far as attention goes? Gallagher at that type of price point and that term on his contract, basically it isn't going to happen. The only guys that maybe would be worthwhile trying to move, even though they're not drawing much, is Drouin Daninoff, who has been playing well lately. So, those would be the cheapest way to move some guys and maybe get those guys, out of the team that, Kent Hughes is trying to build. So a little different situation this year compared to last year, but he'll, I'm quite sure, look at what possible options would arise as we get down to the crunch time by the 3rd of March.
If it wasn't for that injury to Gallagher, I would love to see Gallagher get moved, to be honest. It's probably outside the realm of possibility, even with eating salary. I think he deserves a chance with some good team if that's planning to take a run this year. And I really think he's outlived his usefulness here. I hate to say this because he's been almost my favorite player since the time he first came to town. But he's become injury prone. He's become a different kind of player. Like you used to see him, he'd get knocked down, never called no matter how many guys hit him. And he'd get up chirping and grinning. And now he gets up angry, really angry sometimes. He always seems like now that he's playing on this edge where he's just going to explode. And I don't blame him. The guy has had no help from the league for the entire time he's been here. But for a player who's had 2 30-goal seasons and a couple of 20-goal seasons, he's not anywhere near that at this point. Maybe somebody could use his guts in front of the net, but Jesus, with 4 more years to go at $6.5 million, you would have to eat a lot of that contract, I think. Yeah. To move him in, he would have to be healthy. So
Hughes would definitely be willing to eat salary to make moves. I think he'd also be willing to take on salary in the deal for a prospect or picks for players just looking to get teams looking to clear some salary cap space. The salary cap is the biggest issue in anything in the NHL today. The whole league revolves around the salary cap when teams are trying to make moves. You look at the move Toronto did for O'Reilly. First he went to Minnesota, and then you got 2 teams combined eating 75% of his salary, which the Leafs are only paying 25% to get him. So it's all salary cap related. Now, the Canadiens players that other teams were interested in were Monahan and Edmondson, right? They were at the top of the list. Makes me wonder again why they allowed Monahan to play so long on a broken foot. It reminds me of when Shea Weber broke his foot a few years ago and played 25 games on it, and it led to surgery on his tendons in his feet from compensating for his broken foot. Led to the other injuries that ended up ending his career. And with Monahan, he's had surgery on both hips, so you wonder if the compensating from his broken foot might have affected his hips. Edmondson's got chronic back issues. Is a team going to give up something for a defenseman who might come in, play 1 or 2 games, and then go out with his back again? He missed the first, I think it was 8 or 9 games at the start of the season with his back. He's out again now with his back. A team might be interested in Joel Armia if the Canadiens ate part of his salary, but he got hurt in New Jersey. I think it's 11 regular players now on the injury list. Armia, some teams might remember he played well in the playoffs, which is how he got that new contract out of Marc Bergevin. He was playing with Eric Stahl and Corey Perry, 2 veteran guys. And I think I've said this before. I think Corey Perry might have scared him into playing well, basically saying, I'll stick you at practice if you don't skate. Never mind what the other teams are going to do to you. So maybe a scenario like that, a team might think Armia could fit in and play another role like that in the playoffs. But the Canadiens would need to eat part of his salary. I think they'd be willing to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see moving into the trade deadline. I honestly don't think Kent Hughes is going to do much. Not that he doesn't want to do his stuff, but it's just his hands are tied now with all the injuries that they have.
Hoffman hasn't been really mentioned too much, and here's a guy that I'm not sure if he fits the mix. With the group that he has, kind of a specialty guy, a power play guy, good shot. But after that, there's some concern. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any conversations being had on his availability and what it would take, even though he has another year left of $4.5 million.
And Hughes doesn't have to be in a rush to do anything, right? This rebuild isn't a rush process. They're taking their time. So like a guy like Edmondson, if the offer isn't that good this year, maybe you wait till next year and hope that he can stay healthy and play more regularly next year. But that back issue is a real concern. I mean, having a bad back and playing hockey is not a good combination.
No, it isn't. And to bring up the point from Rick, actually, right now, I was going to bring it up right now with Mike Hoffman, is that as of now, with this recording that we're doing as we speak, TSN was reporting that there was no interest in Mike Hoffman right now. So hopefully that can change for the Habs. So last year, the Habs made 6 deals at around the trade deadline of March 21st. If I put the line at 1.5 trades, is it over or under 1.5 trades that Kent Hughes will make from where we are today to when the deadline happens next week in California?
I think it'll be over, but it won't be 6.
No, I think it'll be over like maybe 2. Like 2 will be the number maybe going forward. I think he's Dadonov, maybe because there's no, this is last year of his contract. Maybe there's some interest in him. The thing I've liked about Dadonov this season is he still works his butt off. Like he works hard out there. The game seems to have got just a little bit quick for him, but having that sort of veteran guy that can maybe play a 4th line in the playoffs, maybe a team will be interested in that. Ken Hughes would be willing to eat half of what's left on his salary, I'm sure, to make that happen. So I'd say maybe 2 trades by Hughes at the deadline.
So, and some things push comes to shove in the last minutes, if you will, where the phone rings and, guess what? This might be worth, even if it's a lateral move to change a guy that, like I said, I touched on, doesn't fit the mix. So I don't foresee it being a really active trading time for the Canadiens, but you never know that some of these names all of a sudden might reappear and be moved.
And the one thing I'm really sure about is that Hughes will wait until he gets his deal.
Yeah,
I think we've seen that. He doesn't. He's very patient. If the deal is there, he'll take it. If not, he's not going to plunge.
Yeah, unlike Bergevin, he won't make trades at the deadline just for the sake of making trades. And I think that's one of the downfalls of Marc Bergevin. I know we're going to have a bonus question coming up on best and worst trade deadline moves. I think Bergevin made a lot of deals at the deadline just for the sake of making a deal, and I think a lot of them backfired on the Canadiens.
Well, I can assure you there won't be any Dwight Kings coming onto this roster by next week, guys. Let's do that there. But we all know what Dwight King.
My God, oh man.
Well, look, for the Montreal Canadiens right now, they do have players that they want to get off. Perhaps maybe not next week, but maybe during the draft in June or during next season. We'll find out what they do moving forward here. But for Ken Hughes, he might be enjoying himself in the California sun during the trade deadline. We'll find out if the Canadiens are active by next week. As we get closer and closer to the conclusion of who could draft Connor Bedard with the first overall pick, Quebec Premier Francois Legault had some comments that the Habs should tank for Connor Bedard. Jack, Todd, you say what about our cartoon leader here about the sports angle of Connor Bedard coming to the Montreal Canadiens?
I would say that Emperor Legault knows about as much about hockey as he knows about education and health. He flunks all these subjects. I find every time the politicians stick their noses into this stuff, they have only one purpose: cheap headline, right? If I talk Canadians, I'm going to be on page 1 tomorrow. If I talk about, how to fix healthcare, I'm going to be on page 15. So they go for the easy shot, and inevitably they prove their ignorance. I don't know if you guys remember, I sure do, when Denny Coderre went after, I think it was Shane Doan, and accused him of using a racist taunt to, I think it was a linesman. And it turned out there was nothing to the story. It was bull. But that didn't keep Coderre from milking it for all it was worth. And that's all he's trying to do. The truth is, if you know the draft and you know where the Canadiens are, and you can actually read the standings, first, second, third, like that, you realize it's almost impossible for the Canadiens to get into that mix at the very bottom. It's actually easier to catch the teams ahead of you than it is to fall to the teams behind you, because the teams behind you never win. So you can lose 5 straight and maybe, you'll gain 2 points on Chicago or something. It's going to do you very little good. I think, the Bedard ship has pretty much left the harbor already. Like, you're not going to catch up to that. And if Legault was paying any attention, he should know that much, or else he should, be quiet for a change.
Well, you also might not be aware it's a draft lottery also. And by finishing last, it doesn't guarantee anything. And the fact that Canadiens did finish last season and won the draft lottery, if you believe in odds, the odds of that last place team winning the draft lottery 2 years in a row probably aren't very good.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But with Legault, I mean, as you're right, Jack, it's just headlines. And anybody who's been to a hospital in this province or had a health issue or looked at the school system, there's a lot of other things he probably should be worried about and should be worried about. And if they did get Connor Bedard, probably the first thing Legault would do is criticize him for not being able to speak French. I don't think Bedard does speak French. I remember the Canadiens golf tournament this year when Nick Suzuki said a few paragraphs in French at his introduction. And instead of applauding Suzuki for making the effort and trying to show that he was making an effort to learn French, he basically took a shot at him and basically said, hopefully he learns how to speak French now that he's captain of the Canadiens. So Legault's always looking for headlines. He got headlines by criticizing Suzuki for not speaking French. He's got headlines for this. We're talking about it right now. But as a premier of a province that has a lot of things going wrong right now, number one is the health situation, since health is the most important thing to everybody. Maybe should have kept his mouth shut on this one. And tanking does, I've said this before on the show, tanking to me does no good. All it does is create a losing atmosphere in the locker room. Yeah. The Canadiens, they had no business beating the Edmonton Oilers. They did. They had no business beating the New Jersey Devils. They did. Some people in the pro tank will be saying, oh, that's horrible. But you know what? It just shows the character that Marty St. Louis is trying to build in this locker room and the culture he's trying to build. These guys don't give up. They fight. They play hard. And I would be more impressed with that if I was premier of the province and maybe be focusing on that instead of saying that the team should tank.
And let's face it, Francois Legault and many of the other Canadian politicians should stick to what they do best or supposed to be doing well. And that's, to make good decisions on what's going on the political front. The hockey side, don't need to get involved in that. You got some people that that's their specialty. That's what they do. And one thing for sure is Martin St. Louis is no way going to accept his team underperforming, not showing up every night, and doing whatever they can do to show well and play with pride right to the end of the season. And this tanking or any type of comments about this draft lottery option should be just put aside, and let's deal with what we have currently, and that is 25 games left. Show up, play hard, play with pride, and show that you care, and that goes a long way and a lot farther than having to listen to some really unimportant comments from our politicians.
Yeah, and you look at St. Louis, I mean, that Carolina game when the Canadiens lost 6-2 and they had that period where they just looked, and St. Louis called a timeout. And that's as angry as I've seen St. Louis on the bench all season. Like at the mid-season point, he had this meeting with the players and he told them, the first half of the season, he sort of let them do their own thing in a lot of ways. But the second half is more about playing for the team, playing for the crest, playing for pride, playing for the city. And tanking does not go with any of what that message had to be, right? So he was upset on the bench that time. He doesn't mind his team losing as long as they're working hard and battling hard. And that's what this team has done. I mean, the game against Carolina and Toronto, they were playing two of the top teams in the league. They got blown out. They had a rough period in each game that cost them. But then they come back and they play a Devils team that's also a really good team, and they took it to them. So it's kudos to Marty St. Louis and kudos to the players on this Canadiens team for not tanking and for showing up to play every game, even though in the standings there's really not much to play for right now other than how low they finish when it comes to the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. But they're not going to go down that route.
Yeah, you look at the teams, and Toronto is much more likely not to show up on a given night than the Canadiens are.
Yeah.
They lost to the Blackhawks, they lost to Columbus in terrible efforts. Like, if I was a coach, I would have melted down with either of those games. And, that you can't, for what you get out of tanking, as Stu said, you can't let that culture creep into your organization. It really does make a difference. And there's nothing guaranteed. And it goes beyond the lottery. Even if you win the lottery, even if you get Connor Bedard, what does it really change? Look at Edmonton. Look at Toronto. They've got generational talents, no question. Nobody's questioning Connor McDavid's talent. And yet he and Austin Matthews haven't come within spitting distance of a Stanley Cup. There are a lot of ways to build a cup, and a big part of it, to me, always goes to your team culture, to the way you bond, the way you work together, the intelligence of your players, the intelligence of your coaches. There's a whole lot going on beyond talent. And the guy that gets the most talented player doesn't necessarily win the lottery.
And the Leafs got O'Reilly more so than for just him as a player, as for somebody who can maybe change their culture in the locker room, especially playoff-wise, for a team that hasn't won a first-round series in forever, despite all the top talent they have on that team.
Yeah.
Well, for the Montreal Canadiens, guys, it's very simple. If they don't get Connor Bedard, they could very well have 2 picks in the top 10 of a very deep NHL draft. That could be 2 foundational pieces. It may not be Bedard, but it could be definitely helpful for their future rebuild and what they want to do. And I cannot wait for Francois Legault's top 10 draft list that will come out in June to get his feedback on what he thinks.
Mario Lemieux, number 1.
Well, don't forget to send us your questions and comments here on Hockey Inside Out, and also sign up for the hockey newsletter at MontrealGazette.com/newsletters. And for the YouTube stuff, go on by Hockey Inside Out as well. And for full episodes and bonus content, head on by Hockey Inside Out and let us know what you think. And for everything else out here, we'll find out what they do for the remaining season that they have left. Maybe Connor Bedard could be that guy. We'll find out. But on behalf of Jack, Stu, and Rick, wish you a great week. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.